So right now it's time for instant wisdom. Here's an interesting part of this. I listen, and I'd invite you to try the same thing. I go onto YouTube. It's such a gift when you want to listen to different people, with a whole bunch of super bright people, people who are accomplished, men and women who've done so much with their lives. And I just find I benefit from it. I do it while I do some exercise, whatever. I'm always listening. And I call that instant wisdom. Well, Jonathan Haidt is an American social psychologist. He's a professor of ethical leadership at New York University. But he's been named one of the top global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine, one of the top world thinkers by Prospect magazine, author of several books, New York Times bestseller. The Righteous Mind is where I was introduced to him, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Recently gained a lot of attention for his critique of what's going on in humanity and art departments at universities, which began with an article published in Atlantic entitled The Coddling of the American Mind. Well, in this clip, really interesting stuff, he addresses the changes in society in general, and specifically with sort of this political correctness trade, with parenting that has produced a generation on university campuses who react to microaggressions, retreat to safe spaces while demanding that opinions they don't like be prevented and punished. Here's the clip.
Political correctness is not new. Even back in the 60s, there were all kinds of things you could not say. There was a big wave of it in the early 1990s and hate speech codes, all that sort of stuff. What's new is the idea that students or people, but especially students, are so fragile that if they're exposed to something that is an offensive idea, they will be traumatized, they will be damaged. And that wasn't there in the 90s. In the 90s, the idea was this is an incredible injustice, you're a bad person for saying this, you're a bad person for studying this, but there wasn't the idea that, oh, you've traumatized people, you've damaged people. So that's new, the idea of fragility. And this grows out. I've learned a lot since Lukianoff when I wrote the Atlantic article. This ultimately seems to grow out of the massive changes in child rearing that happened in the United States after the early 1980s. So if you were born before about 1975, then you had a childhood like people all over the world have always had, which is that you spent a lot of time without adult supervision. And sometimes you got in fights, sometimes you got lost, sometimes you got scared, and you'd figure it out yourself. But we had a real crime wave beginning in the 70s, and there were several high-profile abductions, especially Eitan Pates, 3 blocks south of where I'm sitting right now in Greenwich. Yeah. And right around the time of Eitan Pates, just after that, we get cable TV. And once we get cable TV, we have constant 24-hour coverage of every child abduction. So even though pretty much nobody abducts children other than the non-custodial parent, Americans came to fear that if they ever had kids unsupervised, those kids would be abducted. It is literally illegal to let your 8-year-old walk to a park 2 blocks away. You can be arrested for doing that. So parents don't do that. Kids are never without adult supervision until they're mid-teens in many cases. And so what happens is students get to college and they have not had a chance to really deal with setbacks and even insults on their own. There's always been some authority that they should appeal to. So they get to college and somebody says something. Maybe somebody criticizes affirmative action, and that hurts. They don't like it. So what do? They have this whole ideology built for them. They might even have encountered it before college that says that they are a victim of microaggression. Somebody, perhaps a professor, although professors are always on the left, so it might not have been, it's probably more a student. Most of the complaints are actually about students. So some student said something and it hurts. And so you don't say something back, you go straight to the dean or the diversity administrator. You file charges. So this is what's new. This didn't happen 10 or 15 years ago. This is just the last couple of years. They call it accountability. They say we need to hold professors accountable for what they say. But when everybody in the class is holding the professor accountable for not making them feel bad, I mean, it's like being back in, communist Romania or East Germany. You're speaking to the Politburo, and if you say anything out of line, you're in big trouble.
Jonathan Haidt, professor of ethical leadership at New York University, and as I say, been called one of the top global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine, top world thinkers by Prospect magazine. Kind of an interesting trace, though, of how this happened on university campus, the anti-free speech, anti-freedom, microaggression, safe spaces. Interesting take.